أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So inshallah we will continue our discussion on the practices of Prophet ﷺ, Sunnah, from 11th slash 7th point. So some volunteers to read. See a volunteer. Ahmed is the volunteer, I guess. Is trying to open. Go ahead. 7th point. 11th slash 7th point.
Bismillah. The practices of the Prophet, peace be upon him, are courtesy. There is no matter among them beneath which a light and courtesy is not found. God's noble messenger, peace be upon him, said, "My sustainer taught me good conduct, and how well he taught me." Yes, anyone who studies his biography and is acquainted with his practices will certainly understand that Almighty God brought together in his beloved every sort of courtesy and good conduct. So if anyone gives up the practices, he abandons courtesy. He exemplifies the rule: the ill mannered person is deprived of divine favor and is discourteous in a way that causes him loss. Question: how can there be courtesy in the face of the knower of all things, who sees and knows everything, and from whom nothing can be hidden? Situations which cause shame or embarrassment cannot be concealed from him. One sort of courtesy is covering the necessary members and veiling distasteful situations. But nothing can be hidden from the sight of the knower of all things. The answer: firstly, giving it the greatest importance, the glorious Creator wants to show that his art is beautiful. He veils detestable things. He attracts attention to his bounties by decorating them. So, too, he wants to show to conscious beings that his creatures and servants are beautiful. Their appearing in ugly situations is a sort of rebellion against his names of beauteous, adorner, subtle, and wise, and is contrary to courtesy. Thus, the courtesy of the Prophet, peace be upon him's practices means assuming a stance of pure courtesy within the bounds of the glorious Maker's names. Secondly, professionally, a doctor may examine the private member of someone who is canonically a stranger to him, and if necessary, it may be shown to him, and this cannot be said to be discourteous. Indeed, it may be said that the conduct of medicine requires it. But the same doctor may not examine the member as a man or as a preacher or teacher, and courtesy cannot issue a fatwa permitting it to be shown. To do so would be shameless. In just the same way, the glorious Maker has numerous names, and each has a different manifestation. For example, just as the name of oft forgiving requires the existence of sins and veiler, the existence of faults, so the name of beauteous does not wish to see ugliness. Names pertaining to divine beauty and perfection, like subtle, munificent, all wise, and all compassionate, require that beings be in the most beautiful form and best possible situations. Such names want to display their beauties in the view of angels, spirit beings, jinn, and man through the beautiful states and fine conduct of beings. Thus, the conduct of the practices are the signs of this elevated conduct and its principles and samples.
Jazakallah khairan. The term that's used as courtesy here is like adab, for those who know the word adab. So that is the text. Sure. One thing I just realized at the very beginning when he says, yes, anyone who studies his biography and is acquainted with his practices. In the original, it's more like anyone who carefully look at the biography and who knows his practices, Sunnah, like as if it's telling us that when you look at the
the life of the Prophet, the biography, you should be careful when trying to understanding, and you should read it in the Sunnah, the practices of Prophet, or in a way that, like, you should read the biography without forgetting that he is the Prophet. Don't read it as a regular man.
Right. So anyone who studies Prophet's biography carefully and is familiar with Prophet's practices, meaning Prophet's Sunnah, they will certainly understand that Almighty God brought together in His beloved every sort of courtesy, adab, and good conduct. So if anyone gives up the practices, he abandons courtesy. So we read the text once. It's all yours. You like this? Yeah, sure.
So you read the text. Any initial thoughts? How do we understand? I guess here, every time it says courtesy, it's talking about adab. So there's this emphasis on this relationship between following the Sunnah and embodying behavior that is good conduct or cultivates good character. But before we get into like the question and the answer part of it, just any initial thoughts on the first paragraph so that you can help me ease into the question. Or let me pose this question. Do we see a apparent relationship between what it means to have adab and following the Sunnah? You have a comment? Please.
In the text, it says that Prophet said that Allah is the one who taught him adab, and we are basically struggling to have good conduct. So are we expected to learn it ourselves when he was taught by Allah?
I guess this comes to how we understand the role of the Prophet in our lives, right? If we see his, this is just my sort of initial response, but if we see him as a teacher, or sometimes, like in this discussion, we call him like a TA, or someone who is acting not on behalf of his own knowledge, but is acting on behalf of divine instruction, then I would expect to be taught adab, or good character, good conduct, through the Prophet, right? I would not expect to be left alone to my own devices on that topic. But I guess here, the fact that he says, my Rabb, my sustainer, taught me good conduct, and how well he taught me, there's an emphasis that this is also being taught to him. This is also being given to him. This is not something he's inventing, right? But rather something that he is living, exemplifying by virtue of what our Creator teaches him, and through him then gives me an avenue of being taught as well. So let's do Brother Rikan and then Brother Factor.
If you already have the microphone. So I think that's a very good question. Like in general, we know that everything, with no exception, kullu shay. And kullu shay means like with no exception. It's not just a generic thing. like overall everything. No, every single thing. I mean, it's being created by God, created by the Creator, including our thoughts, feelings, everything is given to us. That's one thing at the basis. Knowing that, for instance, the Imam Nursi also, when he mentions certain ideas, he does not write or mention them as I have an idea. He says an idea was given to me. A meaning was opened in front of me, he would say, right? Some people who doesn't understand, the foundations of his approach would even use it to criticize him, which is stupid. But anyway, it's from one aspect, yes, this is true for everything, including us as well. Everything is given to us. But when it comes to Prophet, there's a special place. And we will probably study this, inshallah, once we finish this text, when we start with another text, the difference between the saints and prophets and so on. But maybe to summarize, the prophets has a special place in which the training is direct. Okay? They are directly trained by the Creator, just like Prophet says here. But when it comes to us, we have our, let's say, the mirrors of our hearts as an intermediary, right? The color of our mirrors color what we learn, what we understand, and so on, unlike prophets. So again, to summarize, yes, everything is given by the Creator, but when it comes to Prophet, we know that it is pure, unbended. It doesn't have any color, colored by his own, let's say, the soul. But when it comes to us, it's not that way. And we know that by practice. We know that, when something comes to me, I usually take it in the way that I'm inclined to take it. And so there's such a fundamental difference.
So the latest times of Ottoman Empire, like 1800s, in palace as well as in wealthy families, it was a custom to bring in murabbiya, like the educators that are going to live from friends that will live in the house and teach the kids of manners, because back then French was the civilized nation. So it was a privilege to have a educator, a murabbiya, since the word in here is also Rab, Addabani Rabbi. So my Rab, my Lord, has educated me, has taught me the manners. This is an interesting thing, because now the Prophet is saying that my manners is neither from, as it used to be the case in the Arabs back in the day, like you go to Bedouin tents where you learn the language, because Prophet stayed there for years. His adab is coming from his Creator. And this matters for us. This is why this emphasis is being made in there, I guess. So who is going to teach me? Like, shall I say, oh, I learned manners from my family, from my Turkish ancestry, Pakistani ancestry? No, it is the American style. Or how do I behave in life? Something as simple as that. And Prophet is saying that this is something that's going to be taught by my Creator. Just how I talk to people, how I behave, how I sit down, how I stand up, like the ethique of daily life.
And I guess the question we should ask is this something that I search for? Like, how do I, what is the proper etiquette of conducting myself in my regular life, if you will, right? Like if we find ourselves at a dinner table and there's the, like 5 spoons and 5 forks and all that. We want to make sure we know the French etiquette, or, all of that, right? Because we want to feel like we have that knowledge and we have that, let's say, level of refinement. So then the question becomes, okay, what kind of adab does not just, these other people, but my creator expect from me, right? And so do I have that question of how can I present myself to my creator in the best etiquette, right? And here, like, etiquette is one word, but like best conduct, best character, right? If you will. Yeah.
So once there was a brother during the dinner, he just opened up the pickle in an interesting way that he just made his clothes so bad, and he needed to wash his clothes during the discussion. So and he was just trying to hide himself because it looks like, since his pant is also dirty and he needed to wash it, it feels like the brother just did something wrong like a child. So he was trying to cover it up. So covering up himself from people just in case they will think that, what did you do, brother? But the question this will come to, how am I going to cover myself from all seeing one? Because this is the ultimate sight that matters. So how do I take an adapt position towards my creator? Because this is something to be cared about. Because I told the brother, don't worry, man, nobody's going to say, unless it is like on your pants. And he said, yeah, it is on my pants.
Yeah. And I guess, that's a very real human feeling we have. Like, we don't want to embarrass ourselves in front of other people. If you have something on your teeth, you're like, oh, I hope someone tells me privately, or all these sort of things. And it's based on how we view ourselves to be evaluated by others, right? We want to feel valued. We want to feel esteemed or respected in some way. So again, how then can I, how then should I conduct myself such that I can feel, I can care about those same matters in so much as I relate to my creator, right? The one who's creating me with this need, in fact, and this feeling. And so not just directing it to other people, but to the one who is creating me, taking care of me, and whatnot. Yeah.
I just have a question. So when we were talking about the practices of the Prophet like a couple of weeks ago, I think we came to, let's say the Prophet used to eat dates, and I don't like dates. So we turned that into like, try to eat the fruit that's in your region. Like if you have an abundance of mangoes, try eating mangoes and thank the creator. But when it comes to adab, for example, so the Prophet used to wear an imama, like he used to cover his hair with a head covering of sorts. So since like the way we're talking about it is the adab that he did, we should try to do them to in the eyes of Allah, because it's the all-seeing eye. So like, how closely do you follow that? Because like even with like when sisters wear hijab, you're putting yourself out there, especially in a society like the US. You're more open to criticism, or just in general, like maybe attacks when you're outside. So just the looks, yeah. So when it comes to like trying to be like the Prophet, like do you try to exactly mimic what he used to do, or do you then again like try to westernize that, like, oh, since the norm here is this, instead of wearing an imama, I'm gonna just cover my head with a baseball cap. So like, how do you go about that? Like, how strict is this?
I think this sort of questioning came up in previous weeks as well, and I think it's a very valid one, right? I think one way to go about answering is that first I have to be honest with myself, right? In that again, as a kid, I might have taken like and even as adults sometimes, like, you know, we're like, oh, how does this celebrity, what do they wear, or what purse do they carry, or if it's not a celebrity of that sort, then I don't know, what car does this person drive? Like we have these people that we look up to and that we want to mimic as much as we can, in fact. So first, I think it comes down to who is the prophet for me in my life, such that I want to not just mimic, but dress as he dresses or do as he does, right? Because if it comes from a place of genuine, let's say, or cultivated understanding of who he is, what he stands for in my life, which then turns to respect, which then turns to love, then I will by all means try to be and do what he does to the extent that I can, right? So if that means eating dates, I will say, yes, I want to eat dates. Now, if I have a distaste for them, you know, like obviously I can't force that. But if it, you know, if it means dressing as he does, then yeah, I should try to do that as much as I can. That, like, for me, to me, that's being honest with what it means to love someone and see them truly as a teacher that is teaching me what is best for me in my life. To the extent that I can't, there are constraints, then yes, like I can eat the apples instead. You know, there's a sort of universalization of a practice that I can make, but I think one has to be, again, cautious on that ground, in terms of, again, how we understand practices, how we interpret hadith, and above all, like, not make excuses for myself, I guess. And that's something that one can individually determine. And again, there's a difference, I would say, between, like, you know, hijab that I know is mandated to me by my creator, right, versus practices that are recommended that will in fact benefit me in my life, in my day-to-day life, right? Such that when I, you know, drink the water in 3 sips or eat the date, that it's not just a mundane act, but something that is transforming that very moment, transforming that the habitualness of that very moment into something that is now connecting me to my creator, right? And yes, an apple can do that, but maybe, you know, like a date does that more for me because I immediately associate a date with, again, these are just examples. But do you want to say something?
First, I guess.
Yeah, please.
So I guess, like,
So I don't know if that answers your question. This is how I understand it, what makes sense.
so it does a little bit, but let me try to rephrase it. So when Imam Nursi is referring to the adab of the Prophet, again, is it exactly what he did? Or is it like, oh, he used to wear a long jubba? Or is it like he used to cover his aura? Like, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, what's Imam Nursi pointing to here? Is it the reason behind the act, or is it the act itself? Like, what's the adab in there?
Brother Rikhan, and then I think we have a question or comment here. No?
I guess there are multiple levels there. So at the very low level, I think this text is very beautiful when we are reading it carefully on explaining the basis of every action of the Prophet, because he's linking. I will talk about that later, inshallah, but just give maybe a hint of it. The text is linking every action of the Prophet to the divine names, right? So that's how he explained the intention. And we know that the first hadith narrated in Bukhari is every action should be understood through intentions, right? But the way we understand intention is usually so, how to say, like premature, that we say, oh, I have, you know, good intentions, and that's all it matters. But in this text, he's defining the intention, what it means to have good intentions. And he says, to the extent you observe and respect a beautiful name and link your action to this name, then you have a good intention. We will come there. But before that, I guess when we ask the question whether it is the meaning behind or the practice, the question itself assumes something like you can separate the action from the meaning. While in our daily life, like in our practical life, there's no separation. You cannot, for instance, feed yourself, like quench yourself, let's say. That's your intention, quenching yourself. You cannot do it without drinking a kind of liquid. So there is always this physical manifestation of it. You cannot pray without standing or sitting if you have an injury, right? But you have to have a physical manifestation of it. That's what a human being is. And at the basis, it's you have a body. I guess that's the answer. You have a body. Your body has to follow your soul, has to follow your spirit, whatever you mean with the meaning, intention, and so on. That's one level. At the another level, I guess, going back to your question, what Imam Nursi means with Adam, I guess in this text, he's referring to, yes, the covering is part of it, but also manners, like the way he would speak, the way he would treat people, the way he would act in a way, like what way he acts and so on. But again, he's not taking them as let's say, humanist would take. He's not saying in the text that when you carefully look at the practices of the Prophet, you will see that he was a very kind man. He was not saying that. He says, when you look at his practices, you will see kindness because there is this all kind and merciful name of the Creator. His actions would be manifestation of this name. So that's, I think, the main, let's say, the crux of the text. But again, going back to your question, I don't think there's a life, a human life, in which the physical action does not follow let's say, the intention. So when it comes to very specific questions like date or imamah, right? I think the key there, as Sister Aisha said, is the honesty. Honesty to yourself and to your own history. Like what I mean with the history, I'm not talking about your ancestors, your personal history. So in my case, for instance, covering of head was always taught to me through imamah from my childhood. That's how I learned it. So when somebody tells me you should cover your head, the first thing would come to my mind is the imamah. If I start questioning, but why not? I cannot put a baseball cap and so on. Now I should be honest to myself. What is my intention? What I'm trying to switch to baseball cap. What is the point there? And to me, at least, maybe not you, but to me, the only answer, because I'm more inclined towards to resemble something else. That's the only explanation for me. So for Birkan, if he covers his head with a baseball cap, it won't be because in his own world, the baseball cap is the covering, and he's trying to imitate Prophet, and instead of imamah, he's putting a baseball cap. That won't be a proper explanation for my case. If we are talking about a hypothetical, the old white American who just, introduced to Islam, and he learns that the Prophet used to cover his head, and he says, oh yeah, I should also do that and put the baseball cap. probably he would be doing a better job than me putting an imam with a reluctance. But this is his own personal life and history. So you cannot judge such decisions without knowing the context. And on top of that, I apologize, I talk too much. But on top of that, there's also another thing. Like we say that maybe the norm in the society is different thing. That is totally true. Like you cannot go against the certain norms of the society for sure. But we mentioned this, I guess, last week. When Prophet ﷺ moved to Medina, the norms of the Medina was shaped by Jewish people, right? And for the sake of not resembling to them, he changed his style. Like he went to somewhere else, just like we come to US. We see certain norms in the society. Then what we should be doing, instead of trying to resemble to them, at least from certain perspectives, not everything, right? I'm not talking about, putting a funny clothes just to be different from them, but at least from certain perspective, you should say that, okay, I cannot equate myself with this society. I have to put my difference, just like the Prophet did, within the boundary, again, he taught us. I guess these, at least to me, this is the framework that my mind should be operating.
Jazakallah. Any other thoughts, comments? Maybe from our lovely sisters. Okay. And brothers, I guess. Yeah.
But also, last week's discussion was talking about a specific type of sunnah which looks to signs of Islam, like alam, which are, once you see that eating date is not such a sunnah, for example, like anybody can eat dates, but putting imamah other than 6, it's like a sign of Muslim or Islam. Or saying assalamu alaikum, for example, like this became like a sign of Islam. So these author was mentioning that these signs of Islam is as important, and it could even be more important than individual obligatory worship. So I guess when it comes to such matters, and by this discussion of last week, we can also say that there are differing categories of prophetic practice as well. This is what we are understanding from there. Because for one side, the author was saying that no, this is even more important than your personal obligatory worship. So this is why I guess we can think about eating dates slightly, or maybe more different than, or discuss them differently than putting an imam, for instance. Because like if it's going to be a practical example, Imam Nursi himself, in his life, didn't apply 2 sunnahs. One is beard, and the other one is he didn't get married. But he didn't get married. So, and in his own life, he had significant excuses for that, like because he thought about this. But on the other hand, for imamah, he was so strict, because this is happening in the early years of Turkish revolution. And back then, putting hats was like, if you don't put hats, they were hanging you. It was that strict. And Imam Nursi said, no, I'm not going to remove this imamah from my head. So he was super strict about one of it. But when it comes to beard, he was for a reason. And the reason, as far as I understand, is like he was trying to make a difference with the traditional madrasa shuyukh, because that style was giving a certain, like it's a certain memorized way of going. So Imam Nursi wanted to present what he understands from Quran in a way that it's going to be addressing people's wisdom, not only since it says so, it must be true, so way of explanation. So for making this distinction, he made it. And eventually, the Republican Revolution also shaved all imams forcefully as well. But these are the two, and which is the part of the question that my brother Kadir was asking last week about beard, for example. So, I mean, there definitely is further discussion that could be made here. But I guess at the systematically speaking about it, the two comments that were made makes perfect sense. Like in your heart, where do you stand? Is it like, am I trying to escape, or is it some sort of piety that I'm seeking?
Oh, just as a side note, I recommend people to ask Brother Yusuf to see his photos from 10 years ago. Or just as a side note.
My beard? My beard is there for the past 15 years.
16
Maybe that can be a post-Halakha thing. Okay. Yes.
We can do a break whenever you like for
So Maghrib.
I just have a question.
Question like what is the definition of adab Rasul, and is it different from Sunnah?
So the question was, what is the definition of adab, and is it different from Sunnah? And I think that's a really good question. And I think let's pause and then let's repeat that question after prayer, so that we don't just get a brief answer and then forget it and then go back. So let's do that, inshallah.
How do I be?
One moment, sorry.
Sorry.
We've been muted this whole time. But we are answering questions. We are on the paragraph of here. Yes, I'm speaking. It was muted here during Maghrib prayer. But we are just asking the question of whether this question in the text is a relevant question of what it means to have courtesy or adab in the face of my Creator. Please, brother, just continue.
And I lost the train of thought. Okay, so I think I lost it. Yes. Yeah. So okay, I guess I lost it anyways.
I just think of the story of Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam when they committed the mistake. Their clothes of Jannah was shedded, and then they had to cover themselves, even though their husband and wife, and there was nobody else, no other human being present, and Allah is the one seeing them. So they had some kind of haya during that time in front of Allah. So I don't know, I just thought it's related.
So I guess like what I was getting from what Brother Yusuf was saying was that similarly, the way that I present myself to my Creator should be done with mindfulness, with purpose. Like there should be a state of awareness in terms of how am I presenting myself to my Creator, who witnesses all of my actions, who sees everything, and that mindfulness, that awareness of being known, right, can be constituted as being part and parcel of adab. Yeah.
And even for that reason, practically, for example, some people would say, like, let's say I do something wrong. Then I say, well, God already knows it. So why should I even hide it from Abdurrahman? Am I trying to be hypocrite? Like, I'm a bad person. There's something bad with me. And shall I hide it from Abdurrahman? Like, I'm a hypocrite? God already knows it. So let Abdurrahman know it too. Then I become a shameless person, but in the disguise of piety. So is this a correct act? Because in here, apparently my reasoning for not trying to hide me, and even there have been certain, at least in the Turkish region, it's called melamis. There had been like tariqa orders, which were in criticism of certain tariqas where people are super pious. Out of their super duper piety, they were just acting very unpious. Like they will go and buy all the liquors from liquor store and then pour it into, let's say, the toilets. But people from outside thinks that they are like drinking all this liquor and whatnot. But the point is, like, since my creator knows me and I cannot hide anything from him, so I'm not going to hide it from anyone either. Like, is this, for example, a proper stand? And I guess there could be many ways to ask the same question, but this is one practical outcome that's out there. Why should I hide it?
So let's see what Imam Narsi says in terms of the answer, right? The answer, firstly, giving it the greatest importance, the glorious creator wants to show that his art is beautiful. He veils detestable things. He attracts attention to his bounties, to his ni'mah, by decorating them. So too, he wants to show to conscious beings that his creatures and servants, or ibad, are beautiful. Their appearing in ugly situations is a sort of rebellion against his names of beauteous, adorner, subtle, and wise, and is contrary to adab. Thus, the courtesy or adab of the Prophet ﷺ's practices means assuming a stance of pure adab within the bounds of the glorious Maker's names. So here, I think the important sentence is what attracts my attention is that he wants to show to conscious beings that his creatures and servants are beautiful, right? And when they appear, so when I conduct myself in such a way where I am not manifesting his beautiful names, right? That becomes a sort of rebellion. That becomes what is contrary to adab, right? Did you want to ask a question? Can you pass the mic?
I had a quick question. So what are the detestable things that he veils?
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that this isn't in terms of adab, but I'm just wondering, like what's an example? How does that look?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I also had that question. So how do I understand him veiling detestable things, right? Because it seems like I see or witness many things that are detestable. So what examples can we think of in terms of this?
So, like Porsche cars are very elegant, beautiful cars. But what makes Porsche is its engine, internals, and whatnot, which is being covered by what we like as Porsche, which is the outer shiny cover. So, like the machine oil and everything, which are not as beautiful and nice, are being hidden under the hood. Like they're beautiful in one sense, but not beautiful as elegant to the eye. So they're being hidden under the hood, or like even interiors of the car is very beautiful, like the leather and whatnot. But if you were to remove these leather covers and everything, you will see that many things are hidden there. Necessary that they exist, but per their creation or making, there are going to be uglinesses to the human eye. I mean, this is just one aspect of it. So this being covered, why do we do that? This is how it is with us as well. Like the human body is being covered with this interesting skin. It didn't have to be. Like I haven't been to, but because my stomach is not as strong, but the Mutter Museum, has anybody been to Mutter Museum here?
What museum?
Mutter. I don't know, it's a German name, but Mutter, I guess. It's in Center City. So like they're demonstrating people in there, like diseased bodies. Oh, okay. Or even my sister went there and she was saying that there is a woman, a pregnant woman, and the womb is sort of unskinned or something. So you see the baby inside, or I don't know, whatever it is. But like it is, my stomach is not strong enough to go such a place. Like these are the things, yet the baby is beautiful, human is beautiful, but the creator is covering it. So I guess in here it's giving a sense that this is how the creation is. It didn't have to be like this. It could have been as it is in the Mutter Museum, but the creator is hiding things like my intestines or whatever. You don't see them. Alhamdulillah, you don't see them. So this is like, author is taking this as a pattern, like such a thing is existing, and the creator even clothes the trees, clothes human, clothes animals, clothes the earth, like everything is being covered. And then you look at the universe in the springtime, you see that it's being clothed with very beautiful of a cloth. So this hiding, although under the hood many things are happening, is happening. I guess this one way to take it.
Okay. So he veils detestable things, or things that, like we see that things are given a aesthetic value on top of their function, right? There is a sort of adornment, a quality of adornment that is happening there, or decoration of beautification that we find. And in fact, he says he attracts attention to his bounties by decorating them, right? So even if we think of like strawberries or things of that sort, right? Like there's an adornment there in which my attention is brought to the bounty in question. And so he's giving these examples. So too, he wants to show to conscious beings that his creatures and servants are beautiful, right? And so the question that comes up is, what does it mean to embody this beauty such that the rest of the world can witness it? Yeah, Brother Recon.
Yep. I think in this text, especially the parts that you just ran, Imam Nursi is making a connection between Sunnah of Prophet and Sunnatullah, Sunnah of Allah, the way Allah acts in the creation. And it's very interesting. Like when we talk about the adab, courtesy, the what comes in mind first, the way we act, the elegance of my movements, let's say, or elegance of my speech, the interaction with other people. As Mohammed Siyar beautiful said, like an envelope, that what comes to mind first. But in text, he says the practices of Prophet are courtesy. There is no matter among them beneath which the courtesy is not found. Under them, courtesy is not found. So he's kind of, and when you read the rest of the text as well, he's kind of redefining this courtesy. He's not talking about the way he acts, for instance, per se, but he says when he acts, when he does something, the Prophet, underneath there's the courtesy towards something else. And then he answered, like he explains, he was what is the like how you say courteous, not right? Courteous. He was courteous towards what? Towards the creator. And how, and then the question becomes, but how you can be courteous towards Creator. So I guess that's the reason this question pops up. He first defines the courtesy of the prophet as courtesy towards the Creator, like as if aligning yourself with the Sunnah of the Creator. The way he acts in the creation, I will act accordingly.
When we say courtesy towards creation and creator.
So, okay, let's put it this way. Courtesy towards Creator as you know from the creation.
The reason I said this is in the first part, he's mentioning being courteous to other, like in the sight of other conscious beings.
So maybe
So that part in the sight of the other conscious beings, the way I read it is the creation teaches the conscious beings the sunnatullah, the acts of God. And this is and with this understanding, Prophet was courteous. From the creation, he would know what is how the Creator, what the Creator is pleased for, and then act accordingly. That's how I read the text, but I might be missing something. Let me go from this aspect first, and then you can, correct me later. Okay, so going back to beginning, the courtesy in the sense that aligning yourself with the ways of the Creator, okay, as we observe in the creation. So, for instance, he says the Creator is the all beautiful one, right? That's what I observe in the creation. I say whoever is creating all these must be loving the beauty. And then I start acting accordingly. I say I should be one who also manifests the beauty. I look at the creation, I say that whoever is creating this, hiding the ugly things from my perspective. And then I start acting in a way that I start hiding the ugly things as well in me. When you define the courtesy this way, then again, this question pops up, like how you can be courteous against your Creator who knows everything. And the Imam Nursi says, by aligning yourself with his beautiful names, everything you see in the creation. So this is, I think, very important, because this what separates a courteous believer, quote unquote courteous believer, from, let's say, a humanist or environmentalist. Let's say these environmentalists also treating animals or plants or other people very courteous way, very kindly, right? But the difference is, like when Prophet do that, the difference is when the Prophet do that, the Prophet focus is aligning with the names, all the names in the creation that he observes, and acting accordingly. The point is not just being kind to others because you need to be kind, or holding the glass in a certain way because somebody said so. There is no arbitrariness there. I guess that's the difference. When you act kind to an animal, there's an arbitrariness there. Why do you act kind? Because, I feel so. The next moment, for instance, this animal invades your house, even if it's a tiny ant, all your courtesy is gone. You smash the ant and you say that, oh, but this is my home. But when you are aligning yourself with the names of the Creator, you say that, well, my Creator is creating this animal here, and my Creator is feeding them here, just like feeding me as well. Now the difference starts, and you cannot smash the ant anymore. So to summarize, I guess the text is beautifully defining what real courtesy is. And the answer is aligning yourself with the beautiful names of the Creator.
Jazakumullah khair. Yeah, I think also from this passage, what I understand is that by exemplifying his beautiful names in my life, right, I become a witness to them, and also let the world become a witness to them through my conduct. And I think that like the definition of adab that arises here then becomes one that is that I conduct myself in the best of ways, in the most courteous of ways, when I live in a state of ubudiyah, when I live in a state of worship or awareness of my Creator, right? By exemplifying His qualities, His names, through my actions, through my practices. And when I go against them and go against what is essentially my fitra, right, my human disposition, then that becomes a sort of rebellion as well against those very names. And it becomes what is the sort of antithesis of what it means to live with adab. Do you want to say something? Sorry.
So I'm a little confused about a specific thing, and it's a little bit of a loaded question, and I feel like it circles back to like like a lot of things that we always talk about, and it is he says, I think this is what you mentioned earlier. So he wants to show to conscious beings that his creatures and servants are beautiful, and I think like the word here that's making me confused is the wants. Allah wants. It is my understanding that like we shouldn't kind of characterize or say that Allah wants something. I may be wrong, but like how first, how can we know that He wants that? And from that sentence as a whole, what is there to be learned from it? Because not everyone demonstrates Allah's beautiful names. So the way that it's portrayed by Imam Nursi is saying that Allah wants that, but it doesn't happen. So that aside, either way, like what's for me as a believer to interpret from Allah wants conscious beings to see that His servants are beautiful. Like, should we do that again to be beloved? Because I know this all ties back to courtesy and how you learn courtesy from the Prophet, and the Prophet is beloved, and then there's a whole chain of I want to display His beautiful names and I'll be beloved. Like, is that what it is? But in general, like, I'm confused about saying once. Loaded question.
No, it's a good question. I mean, loaded or not. How do we understand this? Any thoughts?
Quick example, maybe. Like, it won't be a full answer. But just quick example, like when we read Quran, for instance, Quran is full of such phrases. Right? The Quran says that Allah is, Allah wants, Allah is not happy, Allah is angry, and so on and so forth. So how we read them? We read them as the answers, the conclusions that we need to arrive. Like we always say that we cannot start from the God's perspective. It doesn't make any sense. Even if you try to do that, you cannot achieve it. But they act as, you go to an exam, they ask you a question, and there's the answers at the back of the, the question booklet. So the Quran's ayahs act like in this way. They give you the answer key. So the Imam Nursi also uses the same approach. He gives the answer. He says, okay, when you study the creation in the way I will explain in a moment, you will find the answer that Allah wants me. That's the conclusion. That's how we should read. What it means? It means when you look at the creation, when you look at the things, the way things are being created in front of you, you come to conclusion that whoever is making this must be loving the beautiful things. Whoever is making this must be want me appreciate this beauty. So that's the way I understand this once. That's the conclusion that I arrive.
So along these lines, when you hear an Arabic sentence in which God says, "This is what I like," you understand something. When you see a bucket of rose, I mean, let's make that an example as Muhammad Sial saying, "I love you" to his wife, she understands something. And when he takes a bunch of rose, she understands something. In both cases, we would say to Sister Maryam, like in the second case, she says, "Oh, Muhammad Sial loves me." And we say, "How did you come up with this idea? He just brought you a bunch of rose. Like it's a type of a plant. Come on, like did you ask him whether he loves you or not?" If we take both as a message at the level of the addressee, because he is speaking her language and she understands two languages. One is plain English and the other one is like her humanity. So in this existence, my creator talks to me in two ways. One is the language that he put in my mouth. This is the language that he created. But also he put another language in me, which is, if you like, my humanity, my sign language, which through the creation, he talks to me with that too. So of course, then you will ask the question, what if this is what something that he does not mean? How would I know? Based on the creation, I understood something and I said, "Oh, this is what God means." What if I'm wrong, right? Same thing applies to Quran as well, actually. You can misunderstand Quran too. Because based on the Arabic language, you can say, "Oh, this is plainly clear, that's what the language is saying." But then someone who is a more careful reader than you would say that, "Oh, this cannot be the meaning." So this is why actually your question applies equally valid to Quran as well. So this is why, this question time to time pops up, but I think this is generally coming from the fact that we don't see the creation as a speech. If creation is a speech, and I am the addressee, so I am being spoken at my level. This is the important part. In Quran, I am being spoken at my level. In creation, I'm being spoken at my level.
Jazakumullah khair. So then I wanna just take a moment to bring it back to the question that was raised earlier, right? How do we understand the relationship between the Sunnah and Adab?
Can I say something about the rebellious part?
Okay.
You highlighted twice or maybe 3 times. So, in the text, it says, acting against these beautiful names that you see in the creation. And with beautiful names, we mean like the wise one. Everything is being created in a wise way. That's the name I see there, right? The wise. Everything is being created in a orderly fashion. There's always a balance in things. Even in pain, there's a balance. If you cut your leg, it hurts in a certain way. If you cut your finger, it hurts in another way. There's always a wisdom there, always a beauty, always a balance, and so on. That's what I see in the creation. Acting against them, Water says it's like kind of a rebellious thing. We can read it in the reverse direction as well. So what is the right way? What is the courteous way to act then? By aligning, as we said, by aligning yourself with these names. Trying to be wise, trying to be beautiful, trying to be, kind, merciful, and so on. There's also gives a recipe for something very important in our life. We all have this idea of, I will be the best in what I do. I will be the best shoemaker. I will be the best doctor. I will be the best artist. But we usually take it in the name of the thing we do. I say, I need to be the best artist, or I need to be follow this classical tradition in my art. Why? Because my ancestor did so. Like there are these rules I have to follow. I have to be best in that manner. But author is actually saying that no. If you want to do something nice, do it because you see niceness in the creation. Like when you don't do whatever you are doing, your job, whatever it is, if you don't take it serious, you are going against a name of the creator. Because everything in the creation created seriously. Why you are not acting seriously? Everything in the creation created in a very timely manner. Like if water needed for a plant, water is there, right in the moment. There is no delay. Your eyes need light. The light is there just in the moment. You need air. The air is there just in the moment. But when it comes to you, you say, who cares? I will be late half an hour. This is going against a name you see in the creation. Just be, what is the word? Just being on time? Punctual. Be punctual because this is the Sunnatullah. Be the best in whatever you do because everything in the creation is created in the best way. Not because you want to be famous. Not because you want others to respect you or you respect your work. Who cares about your work? I mean, when you think about it. You need to do it in a right way because this is what you see in the creation.
Rahman, any thoughts? Then I'll say, let's continue. Here, an example is given, right? Professionally, a doctor may examine the private member of someone who is non-mahram to him, a stranger to him. And if necessary, it may be shown to him, and this cannot be said to be discourteous or against adab. Indeed, it may be said that the conduct of medicine requires it. But the same doctor may not examine the member as a man or as a preacher or teacher, and courtesy or adab cannot issue a fatwa permitting it to be shown. To do so would be shameless. In just the same way, the glorious Maker has numerous names, and each has a different manifestation. For example, just as the name of oft-forgiving, Al-Ghaffar, requires the existence of sins, and Veiler the existence of faults, so the name of beauteous does not wish to see ugliness. Names pertaining to divine beauty and perfection, like subtle, magnificent, all-wise, and all-compassionate, require that beings be in the most beautiful form and best possible situations. Such names want to display their beauties in the view of angels, spirit beings, jinn, and man, through the beautiful states and fine conduct of beings. Thus, the conduct of the practices are the signs of this elevated adab and its principles and samples. So what I understand is that to live with adab is to live in a state of awareness, intentionality, to live in a state in which I am trying to be an abd or trying to live mindfully of who my creator is, right? By displaying, by mirroring, manifesting his beautiful names, and the prophetic practices, right, the Sunnah, become the means through which I can realize this. You will. This is my understanding, Brother Yusuf.
And I think with the second point, one important emphasis, which will take us to the very beginning of the text. At the beginning of the text, he was referring to during his life when he had this turbulent journey to truth. He was exposed to many ideas. Let's say Western world is coming with certain ideas. Indian subcontinent have its own philosophy and whatnot. Says there were a lot of paths, but it's not clear where they are going. And each of those paths has some truth in it. Like truth meaning a certain name of the Creator is manifesting there. Some of them is, let's say, talking about justice. The other one is showing wisdom. Like whatever ideology, whatever lifestyle you see there today, you will find a truth in it. But then what is wrong? So what I'm hearing here is the Creator is manifesting all his names. So, but are you in the, if you like, balance point of these names? Prophet ﷺ is taking a stand where, like the beautiful one is manifesting there, and also forgiver is manifesting there at the same time. And then the like Ghafur is there, Rahim is there, Jabbar is there, all at the same time. Because, I mean, one can say that, oh yeah, you know, once this is what we had this conversation with a friend. So he just opened the faucet and the water is pouring. Normally you would consider this as waste. He says, now I am observing my provider creator here. Like it is an act of worship because I am praising my creator as who creates this water with this, but you're wasting the water at the same time. You are becoming like rebelling against sustainer, provider, yet at the same time, yes, you're right. You are really appreciating the grandness of your creator with this water coming out very strongly. So Prophet ﷺ's life is at this careful living where he is considering all divine names and not hurting or rebelling against any of them. Because otherwise we can say, what's wrong with the way French does? What's wrong with the way British does? So I think divine names, but not individually, all of them at the same time.
Shakla. You know, one thing that comes to mind, I'm thinking just like, what are practical ways we can sort of put these concepts together so that they're not so abstract? And I mean, one practice of the Prophet that comes to mind is, we know through narrations that like when he was talking with someone or talking with other people, he would make sure that his back was not turned against others, right? So in one sense, we can say, you know, that that's a sunnah of the Prophet to not exclude others from conversation. Now, I can read this, as Brother Birkan was highlighting earlier, either in a humanist way where, oh, look, the Prophet was just being so kind, or I can see that as through this practice, he's exemplifying a sort of adab, a sort of courtesy, right? In which the divine names of compassion, consideration, right, friendship are being manifested. And so when I look at a practice of the Prophet, in fact, maybe like the question I should be asking is, what is the divine name here that I can observe, right? Such that I can then also exemplify it in my name, rather exemplify it in my life. And by doing so, that becomes a sort of a physical, that becomes a physical expression of living with adab, right? So that was just one sort of, you know, just tangible example that came to mind. Did I feel like there was a hand? Was there a comment? Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
Where we come?
Oh.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
that was not with Adab. Slapping yourself would
So
not be
what you just said, Sister Anshan, and also what Brother Yusuf said, uh, reminded me something. That's also, I guess, a key aspect of prophethood. Then the prophet is the one who can find the balance among all these different names, because some of them sometimes seems contradictory to each other, even to us. Like, how can you be so powerful but at the same time so merciful, and at the same time so just, and so on? The prophet is the one observing all these names and respecting all of them at every action in every instance. When it comes to us, we usually lose the balance. As Yusuf said, like, let's assume this friend of him is really serious, like he is really honest about observing the provider when he opens the tap, but he's missing the one who saves, not wasting. On the other hand, other people would be just so interested in or sensitive to not wasting, to the extent to doing the things in a weak way. Like, you would say, oh, that's enough, good enough. But it's like you're building something. Instead of, I don't know, putting 4 nails, you say 2 will be enough. And it will hold it to a certain extent. But if you push it, a little bit, it will go down. So the person is trying to observe a name of the provider, and also the what is the word like that? Protector, saver, not waster, whatever, but not some other, like not justice, for instance. This is what happens with us. We all very sensitive with certain names, but not all of them. And the prophet is the role model in that sense as well, finding the balance there. And this is the courtesy.
Second. Are we ending at 9? Inshallah? Okay. So do we have, let me say this, do we have any questions unanswered? Was your question answered? No? That's a no. So let's I mean, you can just express it out loud so that people. Oh, all right. Any other thoughts on this? So if I ask someone to give a summary in a sentence or two of what adab is, would we have any volunteers, or how they understand adab after this discussion?
I think kind of going off what Mustafa's question was, because I'm wondering if that question is answered for me. Because and we said the Sunnah, or Nursi said the Sunnah is adab. So I'm wondering, okay, then can there be adab that is not like of the Sunnah, or can there be like, is there an adab where I guess you're just courteous to just be courteous to people? I guess what from the text it would be like, no, there's no such thing as adab or good character if you're not doing it for the right reason, which the right reason in this case we're saying is trying to be conscious of some name of God, whether it's beauty or justice or like, I don't know, mercy, all these different names of God. Like, if you're acting in that consciousness, then it becomes adab. If not, then it's not adab. But also that seems a little too strong for me, which I'm not sure if that's true. Like, because if someone does something and if you don't say thank you, it seems rude. Or if someone if you just act inconsiderate to someone, it just seems rude. Like, okay, maybe neither of them were thinking of God and God's name, but I think even at maybe some level, maybe trying to answer my own question, maybe at some level, it's still they have the feeling within them that they try to live according to that feeling, at least the message of that feeling, even if it's not as much consciously that way. But I guess like this question of like when does like is there even any point to like separate sunnah and adab at this point? Like or is there any benefit to separate them? Say this is what adab is, this is what sunnah is, or is it just um you know
I'm going to open up a can of worms as we're concluding the discussion. There is a super famous question. Is morality possible without religion? You heard that question, I'm sure.
I think has a very different answer. You started shaking it out.
So author's statement in here is a little bold in this sense. He says, prophetic practice is adab. Prophetic practice is what you would consider as moral standards, moral values. Without it, he even said, whomever abandons, if anyone gives up the practices, he abandons adab. Pretty much he is saying, no, there cannot be morality. In what sense, though? Where did he tie it to? He tied it to, because then, of course, we need to ask, what do you mean by morality? What do you mean by adab and whatnot? Are you really aware of your creator? Like if somebody offers me food and I say thank you to the person who offered me food, but the person was just the carrier of the food, was not really the owner of the food, and I am not aware of the real owner of the food. Is me thanking the person who brought me the food a courtesy, or is it an insult? Because we would consider it as, oh, he's a conscientious person. Somebody offered them food or smiled at them, and he was thankful to the person and smiled back. Prophetic smile back is going to be, oh, I observed the beautiful one, I observed the merciful one, and being thankful in response. This is adab, this is courtesy. But if it is, as Brother Birkan was highlighting, and he was referring to this as humanism, smiles back, or hey, you made me a favor, thank you, Abdurrahman, it was a nice fruit, let's say. This is an insult to the provider, the sustainer. So in this regard, the whole conversation and can of worms of whether courtesy or morality possible without religion, in fact, no, it's not. But by morality, if you mean being kind within social norms and whatnot, sure it is. Like people are kind. But in fact, it's an insult to reality. This is why, as Brother Birkan was mentioning, when the, what do they say? Something comes to show. What is it? Push comes to show. Like if the ants invade your house, your courtesy or kindness disappears. Like this is where the balance, because then you realize, oh, there were no balance. It was lack of adab. Like
I think in short, we can say that anything, any kindness or goodness that we try to do we always do it in someone's name, either in my name or another person's name. And if I do it in a name other than God's name, then it becomes a disservice to even the one receiving it, right? Because they might be deprived of it the next day when I don't feel so kind, or they might feel indebted or what have you. So understanding good character, good conduct as being the manifestations and realizations of his qualities, of his names, right? That is what I extract and learn from the Sunnah. And when I practice it, that's what I can see as living with adab in my life as well. Inshallah. Let's conclude there then. If there are no other comments, and if there are, save them for next week, inshallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواكم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. السلام عليكم.